for you, James, is does our proposal need to cover every country worldwide or mainly our own country? Because, of course, there's different cultures, regulations between each of the countries.
Great. Okay, so hello everyone. I think that's a good question. I would focus on your own country. I think that is going to be most useful for us, certainly, and makes it less complex because I think, as you say, every culture, ministry of education is slightly different. So yeah, that'd be my answer to that one.
Thank you, James. And then the next question we have is just was related to Challenge 1. So it says, for Challenge 1, what is the age for young people? From your research, it ranges from 17 to 18. It's quite a big range.
Yeah, I think principally we're targeting sort of 7 to 14. That's when we see the values perception gap kind of shift in young people. But I think with any answers or any sort of ideas that you come up with, as long as you set the context, so say that this is aimed at a 16 to 18, that wouldn't necessarily matter. At this point, there's no right or wrong answer. So as long as you kind of give a rationale as to why you've gone for a slightly older age, I'd certainly feel that 16 to 18-year-olds could act as role models for younger people. So you could think of them as a sort of secondary stakeholder or another audience to engage, and because young people do look up to older people as well as their own age group.
Thank you. We have another question on the campaign. So it says, should the campaign be in challenge? Sorry, should the campaign in Challenge 1 be held in school?
Yes, it should be held in a school. I think the context of what we're looking for here is how do we, it's a long time since I was at school, but how do we kind of like launch something in schools that is going to be exciting for kids? Not necessarily kind of what you usually see on the notice boards. Like, how do we stand out? How do we get kids really excited by this? So definitely in the school setting, but open to ideas of how you can sort of bring that to life.
Thank you. I'm glad to see more questions coming in. This is great. The next question we have is, should we consider the pandemic as a factor in our proposal?
I think not, because I think it's just very complex. I think hopefully schools will all return to normal. We're obviously, as a brand, taking things very slowly, but I think, let's focus post-pandemic or even pre-pandemic and imagine that everything is back to normal, and we have the freedom to kind of, launch a campaign as we would have done pre-pandemic.
Thank you. Then we have a question on the budget. So, what is our budget limit for the campaign? For which countries is the campaign designed, and how many schools are already involved in the Dirt is Good program?
So what is the budget limit? It's a really good question, actually. We've got lots of different budgets. I think let's go for just a round number of 100,000 euros. Again, the way that this will build is that year on year, we hope to sort of engage more schools. But if we start with only a few, we can go, bigger and use the year one activation. But I think budgets, again, it could be hypothetical. If you're working, set the context up front. If you're working with 50K, you can then sort of divide that up. I think it's more that we're looking for how would you do this rather than like justify the full business case. But being realistic, I think 100,000 across most of the larger markets, that would be fine. The campaign is a global campaign, so I think the most exciting thing for us would be, again, to base it on the country you're in. Ideally, Dirt is Good or Omo would feature in that country, but if not, don't worry. Again, it's about the theory and your ideas. And how many schools are already involved? It depends on the country. I think in the UK we're running a pilot at the moment, but COVID has meant that we haven't been able to start. But we're hoping to be in as many schools as possible. So yeah, it depends on the country.
Thank you, James. The next question I can see, I think we've already answered in terms of what kind of school. I don't think there is a specific type of school. It can be across any schools. Also, in this question, we had a question about budget, but as James shared, just look for, around about 100K in your budget. But then the second question is time horizon for implementation. Um, if you're feeling brave, whoever asks that question, would you mind unmuting yourself and kind of giving us some more context, or you can pop it in the chat?
I mean,
If
if the
not,
question's based around, there's no deadline to be launching live. I think we're looking at kind of an annual program. So, um, again, thinking of Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, summertime is the best time probably to be out and about, but it depends on the country you're in. Um, and I think just be worth reflecting back to the judging criteria of what we're actually looking for. I think budget isn't a constraint, but I think if you feel that it would be a more rounded proposal or pitch to include budget and show you're working, that's fine. But I think we can work on hypothetical scenarios.
thank you, James. The next question is a two-part question. So the first part again was around the campaign scale and it, being global, regional, local. But I think we've covered that. It's a global campaign, of course. But then the second part of this question is in terms of demographic segmentation. Sorry, how big should it be also in terms of demographic segmentations and lengths, short or long run?
Yes, so I think just on the first question there, I think that this is a global campaign, but I think, Unilever is a big organization that operates globally. But I think before joining Unilever, I used to work at an NGO, so started in, working on things very small, grassroots. I think within your country, I'd encourage you to think small and think about how we scale this, because we need to find, schools that can kind of really kind of get behind this, and then we use that in Unilever's communications. We can then start amplifying the message and get bigger faster. So I think, think local, and think also how we can work with schools within a community and bring more schools together to work on something bigger. Would be a nice one. In terms of demographic segmentations, I think this one here was more just around like your different audiences. So you've obviously got young people, but you've got their teachers, you've got their parents, and it's just thinking about how you might work with parents and teachers to get young people involved. As a brand, we can't advertise to young people, so that's the kind of big watch out here. The Dirt is Good project is a sort of logo and an identity that hasn't got our Persil or Omo brand names attached to it. But just think of like, what is the role of teachers? What is the role of parents? What is the role of the community? What is the role or the message to young people? So that's more where we're pushing on segmentation. We're not expecting you to go into kind of a deep psychographic analysis.
I'm just looking in the chat and I can see some more context to the question around about the time horizon. So I guess she says, I want to clarify that that should the campaign be held if the pandemic ends, or should we consider it's held during the pandemic too?
I think hypothetically, there's no pandemic. Let's just imagine that you've got total access to schools, there's no limitations, and we're back to normal.
Super.
The reason for that, I think, just for context, is that teachers are under enough stress globally, and I think we don't want this program to get in the way of teachers prioritizing catch-ups with their students. So that's kind of, if the pandemic's still going, we're not going to launch.
Thank you, James. So we have another question on should the campaign be targeted mainly towards eco-anxiety, or can it be regarding any other social issue currently addressable?
A good question. I think eco-anxiety is just a trend that we are seeing emerging, and I think this is linked to the values perception gap and has been heightened by the pandemic. It's an interesting term. I think it's linked to people's well-being, and we know that a program like ours offers some form of antidote to that. So by uniting with other people, taking action, working on issues together has a huge mental boost. And we want this program to be about positivity. I think there's a lot of, anxiety, and there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of, I think the pandemic's been a burden on lots of people, but we want this to be a freedom movement. People can sort of come together and help solve the issues that they think are important. And I think it's worth stressing that we're not looking for schools or young people to become the next Greta or the next Malala. Actions that are just in your neighborhood, very local, are just as important as the bigger actions, just because we need actions in every community to sort of move the needle in terms of compassion.
Thank you. Now we actually have a question from Team Mexico. So hello, Team Mexico, if you're here. So we have a question saying, has Dirt is Good launched any campaigns focusing on reducing the value perception gap yet?
We haven't yet. So we're currently running a pilot in the UK. UK is the kind of lead market. So hopefully in September we can go into schools. How we reduce the values perception gap, there is a theory of change there. I think what we will be looking for is how we can normalize compassion. I think young people feel alone in their concerns because they don't see or can't connect with other young people who share their same passions and interests. But I think from the video that was in our business case, you can, by talking to one another, people will realize that we all do care about the climate and the planet. And I think the research is just how we perceive others to be, not the reality. So it's trying to kind of make young people realize that actually everyone shares these same values. It's just that we're not talking about them. But sadly, there's no live campaign for you to learn from at the moment.
Thank you, James. Lots of questions coming in now, which is great. Absolutely great. We've got lots. Let's go. So we've got Team Mexico again, actually. And their question is, has Dirt is Good approached any schools in the past?
We have done. So I think prior to launching the Dirt is Good project, we had a fantastic campaign with Outdoor Classroom Day. So all over the world, if you go to outdoorclassroomday.com, I think you'll find a lot of the work that we've done, and that was about unleashing young people's potential to do good by being out in the outdoors. And I think the reason we've taken this slight shift and evolution in our stance is because we realize that young people, as well as wanting to play and going outdoors, they want to take action on issues they care about. So that's how we've kind of evolved into this. But there's lots on outdoorclassroomday.com. And depending on where you are in the world, there's different levels of engagement on that campaign. But this campaign is kicking off this year.
Thank you. We got a question. May I know where the judges are from? My guess is I think they're a global panel of judges, but James, you'll probably be able to, say exactly where they're from.
To be honest, I don't actually know who the full panel are, but they will be a mix. They won't all be Dirt is Good, and they will be looking at the judging criteria. So again, they will be a mix of Unilever people. Highly probable they've got good marketing careers, but I think it's yeah, I think they'll be good. There won't be any sort of favoritism towards a particular country if you're thinking of the what's that, the Eurovision Song Contest, if that's the challenge there.
I could believe so. Next question is, how long do we expect the campaign to run? Is it 3 months to 6 months, or like a year? What's the kind of time limit?
So we're looking at an annual basis. So there is a kind of campaign cycle. We could actually share that with you after this call. We do have a chart basically around Earth Day is when we encourage teachers and schools to have an assembly. They will come together, they'll talk about the Dirt is Good project, why it's important to be tackling these issues. But at that event, we encourage teachers to form groups with young people, smaller groups, where the young people will go through some of the theory of change. So in the white paper, you'll see the Dirt is Good way and the principles that we have around becoming a change maker. And during that period, so that can run from say April through to October, we want young people to identify an issue and start acting on that. Later in the year, around October, we hope to launch something around World Values Day, which this will be a reflection on all of the great activities and case studies that have taken place. And this is an opportunity for the brand to celebrate compassionate values and showcase all the examples around the country that they're in to show young people that they're not alone in their thoughts. So I'll share that as a structure. I'll make sure that you guys get that. But that's the campaign cycle. How we bring this to life in the schools is kind of more of the focus of the challenge. Like, how do we get young people engaged? Particularly when, if adults are telling young people to do stuff, you tend to switch off. So how do young people get into the minds of young people and get young people to get behind the campaign?
Thank you, James. Right, we've got another question. So, what are the challenges that Dirt is Good has faced when implementing their ideas to different countries?
Is that internally? I guess the challenge for us launching these campaigns is that we're not experts in delivering school programs. We're experts at marketing products. So we do work with partners, and we like to partner with organizations in countries. So again, if you feel that it's important for us to work with a particular charity you know of, or you've seen how another organization has leveraged partnerships, that is something that we're definitely considering and working on. But I think that our biggest challenge for us is to gain traction and also to make the Dirt is Good brand fun. So I think challenge two is kind of where we feel that the youthfulness, the youth development, the commitment to youth empowerment is what we want the brand to become famous for, and the product helps us to clean clothes for all the actions that young people end up taking. So how do we make that shift? How do we become known for something else? And you'll see through the Dirt is Good project, none of the brand names are mentioned, but the splat that you see behind my head and Akeem's head is signifies kind of play and fun and a life well lived. It can also signify kind of a dirt splat. So that's where we want to sort of see creativity and how we bring that to life. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sounds good to me. What do we have next? So we have, okay, does the campaign have to touch on all social and environmental issues in general, or are we able to choose one specific to call, sorry, are we able to choose a specific cause to focus on?
So the campaign is more about empowering young people to identify an issue so that they care about, and then we encourage them or teach them how to take action on it. So if you were to survey young people, it's highly likely that climate change, plastic uh, issues would come up, but that's not to say that in other countries it might be around gender equality, social inclusion, tackling loneliness. So we don't want to impose a topic on young people. This is about young people acting on issues that they care about.
Super. Next one. Do we have to or must collaborate with an NGO, or can we partner with other businesses as well?
Totally up to you. I mean, I think there's benefits with NGOs and experts in that. There's benefits with working with the ministries of education, but that can take quite a long time to broker those deals. So I think thinking grassroots, finding organisations and any other partnerships. So in the UK, we've partnered with National Geographic Kids, because we know young people are engaging there. So other examples like that, we're never going to tackle this issue as one organization. So this is a coalition. We want to think of it as open source and work with any organization that has the same shared values and purpose as we do.
Now we have a question on challenge one specifically. So it says, for challenge one, rather than designing a campaign, is it possible to propose a new product offering along with it?
For challenge one and a product offering.
Rather than designing a campaign, is it possible to propose a new product offering along with it?
I mean, I guess so, providing it meets the judging criteria. So I think we're specifically looking at how a brand that talks to parents then launches a campaign in schools that is aimed at engaging young people. So I guess there's a blank canvas for you, but I'd be sure that you're meeting the judging criteria. But I don't want to limit you to if you've got a great idea, then by all means. But
thank you. Right. So I just saw a question and I don't know where it's gone, but I saw a question and it was asking, so someone was confused. They said, do they just have to focus on their local market? I think from James's answers, you don't, it's good to be, I guess, locally focused. Of course, I guess there's a global campaign around everything. However, if you can think of, I guess, local solutions as well that are locally relevant to you, I believe that's okay as well. Again, James, if you want to share any other insights to that, but that's what I've pretty much gathered from James's responses.
Yeah, I think keep it to your country, and the country that you're in, and share as much as you can just around ideas and thinking back to your time in school. I feel that you were all at school, more recently than I was, and so therefore it shouldn't feel too distant. And I'm sure there are other businesses, brands that might have come in and run campaigns. So I think keep it local, and I think the case studies that you share would be really interesting for us to see as well.
Thank you. A question around, okay, what is your vision for a successful campaign?
A successful vision for, well, I think messaging is hugely important. I think visually appealing, and I think thinking about the roles that different stakeholders within the campaign have to play, and the channels that they would use to engage young people. So think online, offline, and creativity. Creativity is always important.
Super. We have, hang on. So my Slido is just reversing the questions because I saw a very interesting one and I'm just trying to find it.
And a good campaign needs to be scalable. I think that's the other big thing. How do we scale it? How do we build a movement? So I think this is different to the way Unilever markets to people. How do we build a campaign that year on year, week on week, month on month is building, gaining traction? More and more people want to get behind it and start advocating and amplifying the message because of the impact that we're having.
Found the question. So this might be a bit of a, not a complex one, but I'll read it out anyway. It says, when we target young people ages from 7 to 14, do you have any notes when running advertising online, as there are kids advertising policies and rules restricted in EU? So that's a kind of a complex question.
We bottom line is we don't advertise to kids, so we won't be advertising directly that, but we are going into schools, and therefore it's about the activation that we use in schools. So how did you get information about campaigns in schools? Where was news posted? How did your parents find out about things? Like, we're thinking non-traditional media that we would use, so no TV. We need to kind of unpick that world, and I think that's why we've put this challenge in there, to sort of think of ways that we can work with, whether it is with NGOs or whether there are internal channels within schools that everyone has to use. Posters, things like that.
Thank you, James. I think this question is this next one is directed at me, I believe. So for the executive summary, is there a required format or word count, or can we create it in any way as long as it's one page? Yeah, I would say it just needs to be a one-page Word document for your executive summary. So yeah, I mean, you the easiest way is if you keep it as simple as possible. Just keep it one, just one page of a Word document. If you want to share it in another format, you can, but again, you want to basically ensure that we can access it easy and then forward it on as easy as possible, which is why the one-page Word document just works. The who's going to use this one-page Word document will be your judges. So of course, when you're presenting, they will have this one-page Word document with them, and they can kind of refer to it and understand a bit more about your challenges as well. So that's basically the reason why we have it. So I would say keep it to a one-page, just Word document, so it's easy for us to access, and just normal formatted text on it would suffice. So I hope that answers the question there. Right. So we have a question on the specific people who we need to target. So someone says, do we have to target mothers or kids? Question mark.
For which challenge is this? I
Yeah,
guess.
if whoever asked the question, if you can take yourself off mute and clarify if you like, or again pop it in the chat if you want to kind of clarify what challenge your question is pertaining to.
I mean, I can answer it generally. I think the people that buy our brand are parents, and parents need to role model the behaviors that we want to see. I think when you think of the values perception gap, and in our research, you could consider adults and parents as victims of that perception gap, as in we are, not modeling the behaviors that young people want to see. But I think parents are incredibly important in this, because they are going to be the ones that will hopefully encourage and get teachers to sign up. I think for challenge 2, parents are fundamentally very important. For challenge 1, I'm more thinking around, like, how do we activate this in the school? Like, you're in school, how do you find out about it? It's not about necessarily finding out about it when you're at home. I want to see, how do we bring this to life in schools in a way that is mindful of schools' limitations. So, as an example, teachers don't have endless resources to printers with lots of color ink. So what's the lo-fi version of bringing this to life? How do we use activations to capture content that could be amplified via social afterwards? So what are kids doing? How are we kind of advertising the brand out of the schools back to parents? But think about, like, in school, the limitations of that. So what are we kind of giving schools in terms of resources? What merchandising could we do? But be mindful of the ethical issues with just handing out loads of materials that could go to waste. Think of ways that kids could be involved in activating this in their schools. We want this to be a youth empowerment, youth-led program. So how do we use kids to come up with the ways that they might bring this to life? That's kind of where we're focusing, versus, trying to kind of do a campaign that we kind of see often in today's digital world.
Thank you, James. So we've got about 5 minutes left of the session, so we can probably get through about 3 more questions. I know we have a lot, so what I guess we can probably do, guys, as well, is if there are questions in here that we might not have answered, we might be able to put something together where we can just type you some answers, in a document or something, which I can help with. But just to quickly get through some more questions that you had. One question which is a very recent one, is what if we take a different approach than the brand team's point of view? Is that okay?
I don't really understand the context of that in terms of. So in both challenges, we've listed some kind of bullet points around that sort of provoke some thinking. Again, I'd refer to the judging criteria. Providing there's a good rationale for the reasons that you have decided to go one way or another, and it meets the judging criteria, then whatever you'd like to develop is fine. But sticking to the brief is always a good idea. I would, unless you kind of want to go off brief, by all means do, but just make sure that we can judge it.
Cool. We have a question about what's the lo-fi consideration that you mean, just to make sure.
So analog, what was activated in schools before digital was around. I think that's. But then how is digital used in schools? Does everyone have their mobile phones? Is that something that is allowed? Notice boards is kind of quite lo-fi. Printing in black and white, like how do you think about materials? And we've got a very colorful brand, so black and white's quite limiting. So is there a creative way around that you can bring color to materials that have to be printed in black and white? What are other means of bringing color and life to something that doesn't require printing?
Thank you, James. And I think we're just going to do one more question, and it's around any tips for the finals. So, James, do you have any tips to kind of give the students for the finals?
I would make sure your brief or pitch is on time. Make sure that your personalities come through. Your pitch and your ideas should be there to kind of bring examples and highlight what you're saying, but bring passion, bring creativity, make sure that all of your voices are heard, and have fun. This is about being fun, and the judges they are there to support and encourage as much as judge, but I think make sure you don't just get locked into trying to present loads and loads of slides, because often those are the ones that are hardest to follow.
Thank you, James. Do you know, so we have one more question. I think we have time for one more. We've got about a minute left. So in the chat it said, should the school partnership be the least priority based on the pyramid case?
I mean, I think the partnership, I think if you're thinking of the base of the pyramid, this is about an activation within schools. The reason we've kind of got the pyramid is because schools allow us to have a deeper intervention in terms of behavior change. I think schools for challenge 1 is where we want to activate. How we drive fame for the brand, I think there's the role of digital and mass media partnership campaigns. But I think it's again going back to the judging criteria. If partnerships are part of your plan, please give the rationale. But again, it's more around the execution that we're looking for on this. And it is a challenging brief. It is something that we are trying to work out ourselves, and we don't have the answers yet, but we are working through these.
Thank you for the answers, James. So we are pretty much at the end of the session now. We just wanted to do one thing before we actually ended the session. So could some of you put your cameras on? We want to take a screenshot and then we'll probably share it somewhere on social media just to kind of get all of your faces in here. Just a bit of fun. Oh, we have all the cameras coming on. Lovely.
Should I drop the background picture as this what is it, the background in the chat so everyone can use it?
Yeah, please. If you put the background in the chat, and then everyone can have a background as well if you like.
Yeah, that'll be great. Let me just add that in.
Oh my God, it's so good to see so many faces, so many fresh young talent faces from around the world. So good, this session.
Super. And if you guys have any, questions that you want to ask that might not have been answered, do chuck us over an email and we'll try and get through them as well. Try and answer as many questions as possible. Okay, are we good for a screenshot?
Yes, let's do it. Everyone smile. Perfect.
Lovely. Super. Okay, well, I guess that's the end of the session, guys. I guess take care. And yeah, as I said, let us know if you have any questions. We'll reach out to you after this session as well with a bit of a post summary of what we discussed, and we'll send a recording out to the session as well for you all. So I guess thank you very much for joining. James, thank you so much for your time and helping us answer questions.
Yeah, best of luck.
Thanks for the session, James. Thanks for the session, Akeem.
No worries.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
I had so much fun.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye-bye.